So fifth graders, only a few more weeks of school left, so let's finish them out strong, huh? This week we are going to continue with like ecology, but we're going to talk about food webs and probably food pyramids. So let's kind of go back and review what we were talking about last week. So last week we were talking about the different types of organisms in a food chain, um, and what their role is and how they get their energy. So to start out, we have producers. Producers are um, the very bottom of our food chain, very bottom of our food web, and they create their energy using the sun. Okay, so they use the sun to create sugars that they use for their food. Examples of producers are all plants, some algae, and some bacteria, right? So these are very abundant. Plants are everywhere. There's lots and lots of different types of producers. Our next type of organism is a consumer. Consumers, just like in their name, they consume other organisms. So they get their energy by eating other organisms. So, for example, a rabbit that eats plants to get its energy is a consumer. Insects that eat plants to get their energy are consumers. Hawks that eat rats and mice and rabbits and snakes, they get their energy by consuming other organisms. So there's different types of consumers, right? We have herbivores, we have carnivores, omnivores, and scavengers. Um, all of these different types of consumers are all consumers, but some consumers eat um, only meat. Some consumers eat only dead bodies. Some consumers only eat plants. Some eat a variety of different things, right? But they have one thing in common: they all get their energy by eating other organisms. They do not get their energy by converting sunlight into sugar. Uh, and finally, our other type of organism in our food chains and food webs and on our landscapes are decomposers. Decomposers are a little bit harder to find. You have to look a little bit harder, but they're kind of everywhere, if that makes sense. Decomposers break down dead bodies or dead things, not just dead bodies, but they break down dead organisms, plants, animals, whatever. They break down dead organisms to get their energy. Now, examples of these can be microscopic, like bacteria, or they can be a little bit easier to see, like fungi. So this week we are going to move into food webs. So let's pull up the notes here. So our notes say a food web is a diagram that shows the feeding relationships between organisms in an ecosystem. Let's make that a little more simple. So basically, let's go back and talk about a food chain. A food chain is like a linear line that shows how energy flows between organisms. It's a straight line, so it'll go from like a plant to a rabbit to a snake to a hawk, and that would be a food chain, right? One single line. Now, a food web is a little bit more complicated. Instead of being a straight line, it shows like a bunch of different food chains in one picture, right? So instead of having one straight line, you have many different ways that energy can flow in this web, but it still shows your different types of organisms. So for example, you always start with your producers here. We have grass, we have seeds and nuts, and we have a bush, right? These organisms all get their energy from the sun, right? They convert sunlight into sugars, and that's how they get their energy. Now, from there, you have a bunch of different herbivores like this grasshopper, this prairie dog, this squirrel, that get their energy from these different sources, right? So this grass doesn't just go to one animal like in a food chain. It would show it going in one straight line, but this grass can be eaten by grasshoppers, prairie dogs, or this deer, right? These nuts and fruits can be eaten by this bird or this squirrel. This prairie dog can eat this shrub, and so can this deer, right? So it's a little bit more of a realistic image showing how energy can be flowing in an ecosystem. So as the energy flows from the producers to the herbivores, you also have your higher level consumers like carnivores, right? This mountain lion here is a carnivore. It only eats meat. But there's many different sources of meat on a landscape, right? You can have this mountain lion eating deer. This mountain lion could eat prairie dogs, or it could eat this squirrel. It doesn't just eat one type of animal like in a food chain. So the food web is like a whole bunch of food chains in one picture. Okay. You can make food webs for many different scenarios, right? You don't just have them. You can make one for Minnesota, you can make one for the rainforest, but it just puts all of those organisms into one picture and shows how the energy is flowing between them, right? Animals eat these different organisms, animals and insects, or whatever, fungi, they eat these different organisms to get their energy, right? They're all consumers. They have to consume these organisms to get their energy, and it's very interconnected. So let's look at another food web here. So it's showing a bunch of different animals in an ecosystem. So you start with your producers: corn, flowering plant, lavenders, and mangoes. So probably not in Minnesota, right? We don't grow mangoes. Your herbivores are on the bottom here. You have grasshoppers, butterflies, and fruit flies. And they all eat different plants. Now, your higher level consumers, you start to get into insectivores, which means they eat only insects. So you have dragonflies, a thrush, which is a bird. You have frogs, and these eat all these different insects because they are consumers, right? They're starting to eat other organisms to get their energy, right? These insects are also consumers, right? They also eat other organisms to get their energy. As you go higher up in the food web, you have some different types of animals like carnivores, omnivores, things like that. So this python would be a carnivore because it eats a whole bunch of different things like rats, frogs, this wolf, and this probably this bird would go straight to the python. That python is a carnivore, and you can see in this web which animals and different organisms it eats. You also have this eagle, which eats the wolf, the rat, the python, the frog, and the bird, right? So in food webs, it's not just like a linear line, it's a whole bunch of food chains in one image. And it represents more accurately how energy is flowing in an ecosystem. So that was our notes or for the week. We are going to learn about food pyramids next week, kind of wrap up our year. Probably have some sort of project next week to get us through the end of the year. For this week, the Edpuzzle is going to be graded, and I'm also going to have one more assignment related to food webs. Make sure you are checking Synergy to make sure you're getting an accurate grade. Make sure you're getting your assignments turned in because we don't have a whole lot of assignments. One assignment can be worth a lot of points, and if you're missing one assignment and it's a missing, missings are a 0 right now, you can always turn them in for full credit. If you turn in your missings, you will get full credit, or it'll bring your grade right up. If you have any questions, let me know. Be on the lookout for a Google Meet. We'll probably have one, let's say Wednesday or Thursday. I'll send out a reminder today about what time I choose. So be on the lookout for that. I hope you have a great week. If you have any questions, send me an email.